John, welcome and thank you. It goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a huge privilege to be here with you. And one of the reasons that I felt compelled to ask you as my first guest is that even before I took on this role of Chief Engineer, your name was brought up by so many people in terms of the person that I needed to meet as eminent in the field of bridges and at Aurecon. And so welcome. I believe your role now has recently changed to Global Capability Leader Engineering.
That is correct.
And to me, that's incredibly exciting because we're going to dig into your career, and you celebrated 50 years last month as an engineer. But that feeling of eminence doesn't just come from longevity necessarily. One of the things that I'm most fascinated to learn from you is what is it that has driven your career and kept you so excited about the profession throughout this period of 5 decades?
Thank you, Tanya, and certainly privileged to be here today. I think the overriding factor that enables me to get up every morning and look forward to coming to work is passion. I have a great passion for what I do. I enjoy what I do. But passion also means that I want to get it right. I want to do the right thing for my client. I want to produce an output that is exactly what it should be. And that, of course, means that I have a great feeling of pride in what I do. And if I put that all together, that gives me a great incentive to keep at it, keep coming to work, keep working with some wonderful people. I guess that's the other thing that sits with passion is the people that you work with, and I have learned so much from people in the industry, particularly at Aurecon. I've now been here almost 38 years. I feel I've helped a number of people along the way, and many of them are still with Aurecon, but their success is their success. I might have contributed in some way, but their success is what they've earned. But they've helped me.
So that aspect of people in engineering is something that I'm personally fascinated with as well, because I think early in my career, I was very much trained from the science of engineering, the kind of getting it right from a technical perspective, which of course is fundamental. And if you don't have that, then then we're not upholding the profession. So it is essential. But as I progressed, I found that working with people, being mentored by people, but more importantly, the impact and outcomes of our work on people was where I found my passion. And in that sense, I'd love to dig into a little bit more about you and who you are as a person, and how some of that drives your passion for engineering, but also, informs the outcomes of your bridge engineering. So maybe we'll just take a step back and tell us a little bit about when you were younger and your sort of childhood. What were some of the things that, looking back on that time, influenced who you are as an engineer?
So one incident sticks out particularly in my mind. In my early teens, we had an old alarm clock and it wasn't working. And in those days, you could take the back off an alarm clock and you could see how it works. And my dad gave it to me because I was always interested in looking at things and how things worked. And he said, see if you can fix this. It doesn't matter if you can't, but just have a go at it. And so I did, and I got it going. And he then had a spark for me. And he said, why don't you, now that you've done that, why don't you consider taking it all to pieces and putting it all back together again? Now that's a major task to do, particularly, I think I must have been about 12 or 14 or something like that. And I had a feeling I wanted to make it work. My dad had given me a challenge and I wanted to make it work. And so I sketched, before I took it apart, I sketched where everything had to go, so I would know where it would go back again. And looking back, I think that was John Hilton's first engineering sketches.
I was just thinking that. I feel like that was John Hilton as the engineer before he knew he was an engineer. But that curiosity and that creativity.
Yeah.
And we hear that a lot, right, about engineers. If you ask many engineers about their experiences when they were young, you know, I've heard a lot of engineers talk about Lego or taking something apart and putting it back together. So that idea of creativity and curiosity, we know, is something that draws a lot of people into engineering, either deliberately or by chance. Tell me a little bit about, you described always wanting to get it right and do a little bit better. Where do you think that comes from? Was that training, or was that also something that was kind of innate in you?
I think it was innate in me. I think it's partly hereditary, maybe even fully hereditary.
Interesting.
But doing a task and making sure it's done exactly how it should be with the right output is incredibly important to me. And I know my career, sometimes I've been a pain for people because of that. But at the end of the day, when I'm finished and I go home, I'm in bed lying at night before I go to sleep, I want to look back on the day as something I'm really proud of. And I think that's what is perhaps driving this approach I have of making sure I get it right.
Which is incredibly motivating, I think. And one of the things I find about engineering in that sense, not so much now that I'm not designing as much, but that feeling where you can look back and that feeling of progress and contribution. And I think maybe we'll tap into the fact that that isn't isolated. Engineering isn't sort of something that you necessarily do alone. You might take on tasks alone, but it's always about people. So we'll dig into the kind of collaborative approach to engineering in a little bit. But another thing before we do that interests me in what you said was that pride. That, you know, that feeling of passion and pride in what you do. And I always find it interesting to understand those moments of kind of joy and pride in our projects. So I'd love to hear from you some of the insights into perhaps a favourite project or favourite moment or moments that come to you that stick out in your career, I guess, as highlights.
So, look, a project that I think is the project I'm most proud of, even though I've spent almost 50 years doing bridges, is not a bridge. It's the Sydney Harbour Tunnel. And I joined Aurecon 38 years ago to work on the Sydney Harbour Tunnel. And there was a particular section of the tunnel underneath the Opera House forecourt that required effectively the forecourt to be underpinned, and there was a lot of complexity with the connection to the sunken immersed tube units and the connection to the driven tunnel, and all had to be done underground. It was incredibly complex. The construction sequencing was very difficult to determine, and I was given a significant role on that component of the tunnel, and I had no idea how to go about it. I'd come to Aurecon designing some fairly simple small to medium span bridges, and suddenly I had this very complex work to be done. But what I did have was 2 or 3 subject matter experts who just knew it. This was in the infancy of tunnelling in Australia. This is in the late 80s, early 90s, and we had 3 people who just were so good at what they did and gave me a lot of confidence and enabled us to produce a design that worked really well. It also showed me the importance and the value of engineering judgment. That often we had to make decisions based on engineering judgment, that whatever modelling we did, we never could get it exactly and precise. So at the end of the day, someone had to make a call. And I saw the value of a subject matter expert making that call. And that was a real eye-opener for me, that if you know your subject really well, you can make a call and others will listen. The bridges I had designed up until that point were very mathematical, and you could work out the stresses pretty accurately. You could size the members very accurately. You could come up with a solution that was very much a step-by-step, and you get the answer. This was different. Ground doesn't have properties that you can define exactly, and there's information in the ground material that you're just never aware of, and at the end of the day you need to make some real judgments, and if you've got the knowledge and you make those judgments, that's incredibly powerful.
A couple of things strike me about that example that I think are really interesting. The first is you're an eminent bridge engineer, and here you are talking about a tunnel as one of the projects that sticks out in your memory the most. And that's something I love about engineering that I don't know that we celebrate enough, which is the possibilities and the agility in taking skills and transferring them into different applications. And certainly I think it's no surprise as an eminent engineer that you were able to do that. The other thing that came to me was courage. And I think it's one of the traits when I've talked to a lot of globally eminent engineers, one of the commonalities is courage. Tell us a little bit more about your perspective on the relationship between courage, competency, and confidence, because you mentioned confidence as well, and I think confidence and courage, align very nicely. But I have a view on competence being the foundation of all of those things. What's your view on that?
So, look, to be a successful engineer, you need to have courage and you need to have competence. Competence gives you the means to make a decision. We have many people in the industry who are competent. In order to make that decision often requires courage. It's one step forward. And I say to young people today that a means to further your career is when you're sitting in a room or in a meeting and you know the answer because you've looked at it and you've analysed it, and there are people sitting around the table talking about different possibilities, and you know the answer, you know the truth, speak up. Sometimes people don't speak up because they feel they haven't got the seniority. Sometimes they don't speak up because they feel that there are others more senior in the room, but they know the truth. They know the truth. They've analysed it. They know it better than anyone. If you know the truth, always speak up.
One of the things that you talk about there in knowing the truth is, in my view, having done the work. And we know that successful people in all walks of life have done the work, and they've done it repeatedly, and they've done their time. Is that something that you think has served you in your career, or is it doing the work and something else?
I think the work gives you the platform. You need to do the work, you need to work hard, I say to young people, to have the platform in order to move further in your career. It's very difficult, certainly it would have been for me, to be in a position where I'm leading people and making decisions if I didn't in myself feel I had a very firm foundation of technical competence in order to do that. There are people that can advance rapidly up the chain, but they're without having that platform. But I think they're very few and far between.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a few commonalities coming out there in terms of having that platform. And you talked about collaboration with some subject matter experts and other people. Tell us a little bit more about that extra thinking or extra passion that I think you display, but a lot of people that ultimately at the top of their profession. What is it that really excites you, not just about the technical side of things, but about that collaborative aspect and the outcomes of designing and seeing bridges built? That kind of, I guess what I'm wanting to dig into is that human aspect of what we do. I actually started my career as a bridge engineer, and it was interesting to a degree. What was a pivotal moment for me, the thing that stands out about the power of engineering is when we supported a charity, Bridges to Prosperity, and the power in their organization was creating very, very simple bridges that allowed people in underserved communities to access healthcare or education, or to sell fresh produce, or the things that we take for granted. And that power in engineering is something that sort of serves me every day to think I can make a difference. Tell us a little bit about that passion and excitement, not just on the technical side, but on the kind of the bigger picture of engineering.
So engineering, certainly the engineering that I do and have done for virtually all my career, associated with design. Design is a very creative process. You're starting with a blank sheet of paper almost, a few parameters start to come in. You never know your final result until it all evolves. You need people to help you to do that. So you need a strong team. You need a strong feeling of collaboration. And the test of that collaboration often is when something goes wrong. And inevitably things go wrong. And there's a big project, inevitably things will happen, and with all the best intent in the world, there's a situation where people need to come in and sort it out. That's the time when you see the true collaborators of the people that will not step away from the problem, that will come in and look to sort it. That's something which I find incredibly exciting. It's something I find right through my career. If there's a problem, I'm keen to get in there and get involved in it. And if I'm working with a group of people and we're sorting on through something that's really quite difficult, but we get it sorted after a few days, and we've trusted one another and we've thought out different ideas and it's all worked out, you come out of the relationship with those people very differently.
Yeah.
Because you've had to trust them implicitly and they've had to trust you implicitly. You've proved that you can trust one another and you can move forward to the next project after a crisis. And,
so that trust.
Yeah.
And the public, whether they do it consciously or not, they trust us and our abilities to keep them safe, and to protect our communities and the environment. And I think what's coming to me in what you're sharing there is that starts with trust in the team. And the bigger picture of eminence isn't just the person at the very top of the triangle. It's the support and the trust of a much deeper system and team behind them. The other thing that came to me as you were talking there, or character trait, is resilience. And I think that's an interesting one as well for a couple of reasons. I've seen that as one of the common traits in eminent people is resilience, that it's not just a linear path to the top. You don't kind of turn up and just work hard and suddenly you find yourself at the top. What you're describing is that there's ups and downs. Do you think resilience is one of those key things that that has helped you in your progression?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Resilience has helped me. Sometimes things have happened and they haven't happened the way I wanted them to happen. Sometimes it may not be my fault. Sometimes it has been my fault. And so your career can inevitably go up. And I know of no one whose career has gone straight up. So having resilience, the ability to get back up off the canvas and keep going, is absolutely key to success.
Do you think we talk about that enough? The kind of ups and downs of a career or the ups and downs of a project. I certainly think back on my career. You know, I learned about resilience the hard way when something didn't go right, and I thought, you know, I took that in the beginning as failure because nobody had taught me that ups and downs were normal and they were part of the process.
Failure is underrated.
Nobody
learns from, people learn very little from success. So lessons learned are incredibly important. We're very good as a profession in sharing our successes. We're not so good at sharing our failures.
So earlier you talked about that pivotal moment for you in terms of learning about engineering judgment, and that's something I'm passionate about as well, particularly as I see new technology impacting the way that we're working. And so I'm fascinated to learn from you a little bit more about your perspective on the importance of engineering judgment as we move forward with new technology. In this moment, the thing that people I think are getting very excited about is the use of AI and automation in design and construction, more so in design. Tell us a little bit about your perspective. You've seen and talked in the past about the way you might have approached bridge design at the beginning of your career versus what's available to you now. How does engineering judgment come into that? And what do you think is possible for the future of design?
Certainly early in my career, so we're talking 40, 50 years ago, the designs I did, whether it was on bridges or the Sydney Harbour Tunnel, I had a handheld calculator, I had a 0.7 clutch pencil, a scale rule and a set square, and that's how I pretty much designed almost everything. That meant I didn't have the knowledge of how the actual stresses were in a structure that's available today in very sophisticated models. I didn't have that knowledge, so I had to make a lot more judgments at the time. And I think looking back on my career, they've stood up pretty well. When I look at the tools available today and the sophisticated models from a structural analysis point of view, we can model with complexity almost anything, and we can get a very accurate result. But I say that from a modelling point of view, modelling is a leveller in the industry. Judgment remains a differentiator.
And so in this moment where we're looking to do things faster, quicker, in ways that use machines in a way that engineering hasn't in the past, how do we develop judgment? Is it just about time and experience? Is it a different way of learning? Is it a combination of things?
I think it's a combination. You've got to have the knowledge. As we said earlier, you've got to have the courage. I think if you look at AI and the way in which AI is progressing in the industry and the way it's progressing in Aurecon, we can produce things much quicker now with AI. We can enhance the quality to a lesser extent, but AI properly used can enhance the quality. But in my view, AI gives us the mule train if we've been walking. it gives us the EV if we've had our mule train. AI doesn't have a conscience, doesn't have a heart. If it had a heart or a conscience, it would be a pretty cold-blooded heart. An example is the way in which AI would treat safety. You need human judgment to always be in charge of AI.
So leaning into that aspect of engineering, this sort of the human element, which to me is the differentiator in individuals as well as when we create teams that are eminent. You touched on people that had really influenced your career from a mentoring perspective or from a sort of knowledge sharing perspective. Tell us about some of those key moments where people have really influenced your career.
So I've had several people in my life who have made a step change in my career. And they've come in almost like a periphery. And they've come in at a certain point and they've said, John, I think you can do X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z is something I wouldn't have thought myself capable of doing. And inevitably my first thought is, no, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing now. I can do this pretty well, and why put myself up into a difficult situation? But then I've thought about it, and these people have been knowledgeable people. These people have been smarter than I. These people have had more experience than I. And I think if these people can see that I can do something, then I shouldn't dismiss it. So I think this is a message for young people on the podcast, that in your professional life, people will say to you, why don't you try something else? Why don't you think about doing X, Y, or Z? Don't dismiss it just because you haven't thought about it. If people give me a challenge, I find it very hard not to accept it. And these people, these two or three people, if you like, have thrown me a challenge.
So a couple of those traits that I've also seen in people that are, really passionate about what they do and at the top of their careers is openness to thought, thinking differently, and also not being afraid of a challenge. So not just looking at the problem in front of them, but really embracing the opportunity, embracing the privilege to be in the position to solve some of these problems. Is that one of the motivators for you?
No, very much so. If I'm given a design brief for a bridge in a certain location, people can look at that brief and see and say, what have I done in the past that I can move across and mould into what's required now? If you like, it's almost a little bit like shoehorning something in, or you can say, let's start with a blank sheet of paper. What does the client really want? What are the parameters here? Forget about what I've done in the past. Look at what's really needed here and frame the solution around that. That's the real value in engineering.
I find engineering in this moment really interesting because we have evolving materials, particularly sort of higher strength, some lower carbon. We have some new and fun tools to play with in AI and different forms of automation. We have the age of the engineer, where we know that we need more engineers to solve complex challenges and address growth. So it's an incredibly exciting and turbulent time. What's your view on the opportunities for the future and how that might evolve with this complex mix of things coming into our profession?
So very complex mix of things coming into our profession. Sustainability is a strong overlay in that, as you say, new materials, new opportunities. This is all about change, and change brings opportunity. This is a really exciting time to be an engineer in the world today.
We talked about the common traits in people that are eminent, and there seems to be around 7 traits of eminence. So we've talked about passion, which I think, we've heard a lot from you about what drives you, what motivates you, and your a living embodiment of passion in still, working and contributing after 50 years. Curiosity, you talked about that almost being innate in who you are. Exploration, excellence, courage, creativity, and resilience. What's missing from that list?
So I would add authenticity.
Oh, I like it.
So people are looking for engineers. The authenticity cuts through the maze. People are looking for the truth. The truth can be what they want to hear, or it can be something else, but they need to know the truth on a certain situation. If you can advise with the authenticity, that gives you credibility. That is very powerful, I think.
It's almost related to trust that we talked about earlier.
It creates trust. People will trust you. Even though it might be exactly what they're after, they'll trust what you're going to say. Yeah.
So for me, eminence is almost looking for the next, being the explorer, doing things that are just a little bit different, but in a purposeful way. What do you think makes you eminent?
What has made me eminent has been the people that have supported me and the teams I've had around me is what has made me. It's made me what I am today, and I owe an enormous gratitude to them and the companies I've worked for, particularly Aurecon. And I'm a bridge engineer that enjoys what I do, and I think where I've ended up in the profession is just where I've sort of washed up on the shore.
When I ask that question of people that are eminent, it's really interesting to hear how humble they are, but that they don't necessarily stop to see the profound impact that they're having on the world. In the moment we're in, how might we help people balance that important recognition of the team behind the eminent person, but celebrate the importance of engineering in the world?
This, I believe, is now the age of the engineer. When you look at the problems in the world today, science can give us the tools. Engineers are the ones that have the knowledge, that can decipher what needs to be done and can make the right decisions to get the world to a better place than it is at the present time.
That's wonderful. And so sort of wrapping up, I guess, what I hear from you there is that for the future, if we were to help younger people who perhaps are considering engineering think about why engineering in this moment, I love your perspective that science can give us the tools, but is it fair to say that it's the human element, the heart, that drives engineering and really makes a difference in how we work, who we work with, and what difference we make in the world?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, John, this has been such a great conversation, and I know I've had many insights that I didn't have before, and I really hope that our audience finds the same thing. So thank you, and look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and I feel privileged to have been interviewed by you today. Thank you.
Thank you.